Hello, everyone. I'm John Seroka with Seroka Brand Development and the Mortgage Technology and Marketing Committee Chair. And welcome to our webinar today, How to Stay Visible in a Crisis. But before we start, I'd like to thank our MTAM committee sponsors at Tavant. Tavant's paycheck protection platform empowers lenders to keep small businesses alive and paychecks continuing to flow for their employees. Tavant's white labeled platform can be deployed in less than 24 hours and enables the application intake, underwriting, and disbursement. Tavant has devised a turnkey solution with its Velox suite of products. Velox is Tavant's AI-powered digital lending platform and gets the lender up and running with the digital application process and allows a processor or underwriter to review the borrower's application and supporting documentation and make a decision in minutes. For more information, visit Tavant.com. And now for our topic today, ladies and gentlemen, how to stay visible in a crisis. Look, we all found ourselves in a very unexpected situation. Now, the big question becomes how you should be positioning yourself right now so that you don't appear tone deaf, yet position yourself for both current and future growth, because people will remember and form opinions about brands based on how they approach the situation. So with us today, I am thrilled to present to you Dahleen, Senior Vice President of Senior Vice President of Strategy and Sales at FirstClose, and also the MTAM Committee Co-Chair, Dustin Hobbs, Communications Director at the California MBA, Amy Hansen, Vice President of Public Relations and Strategic Planning at Seroka Brand Development, and Linda Wagner, Marketing and Business Development Strategist at CrossCheck Compliance. So first, by way of some background, this webinar is a production of the Mortgage Technology and Marketing Committee. The committee was formed to support the development and dissemination of new technologies and marketing strategies that the mortgage industry needs to embrace. So as we go through this, please submit your questions and I will direct them to the right individual as they come up, or just wait until the end and we'll have a Q&A time at that point as well. So with that, let's kick this off with the first question for Amy and Joe. Amy and Joe, what is the right balance between staying visible and too much marketing? Amy, if you want to take that first.
Okay. Well, first I want to say hello to everyone and thank you so much for having me today. This is a really good question because the reality is a lot of people are not actively looking to switch vendors right now. But that's not to say that you can't stay top of mind and visible with the right message. Most companies abandoned their existing messaging and marketing strategies when this hit to ensure that their messaging didn't seem tone deaf. And that was really important to do. During this time, it's really important to identify your purpose and lead with that. You should really be thinking first about doing the right thing and then driving awareness for your business. Over the last 5 weeks, we all have really become accustomed to seeing marketing and advertising that has the piano playing, the somber tone, the empty streets, we're in this together and stay safe. And I think it's starting to get really repetitive and companies are starting to risk sounding insincere. I heard the term corona washing yesterday, and I think, that's a real risk. I'm not saying that tone is bad and not appropriate. I definitely think your message should be caring. But I actually saw an interesting study the other day about what people prefer during a pandemic in marketing and advertising from companies. And 10% of people want companies to express concern, but really what the majority of people want is for the companies to communicate to them effectively on how they have adjusted their business and updates, how they're continuing to operate. So I think it's really important that your marketing strategy includes the proper messaging. one that, you know, does have that caring undertone, but that you're really delivering useful and meaningful information. You need to make sure that you're putting your audience first and addressing their needs. Make sure you're communicating regularly, that you're educating them, that you don't come across as salesy. I always think that's a good approach, but I really do now. You know, companies need to have that human message. One idea is to even have your staff do videos to let people know that who they work with on a daily basis. So I really think it's all about educating your customers on how you can help them and what information is valuable. Things are changing so rapidly and fluidly. So I think, you know, you need to make sure that you stay in front of them, but you do have a risk of communicating too often. So email is a preferred tool. And I don't think companies really should be sending emails out more than twice a week if they don't have to, as long as that information that they're sending is helping other people, you know, giving them tips. And then I do think, you know, now is also a time for them to really start thinking ahead too, for the future of kind of how they want to position themselves when they come out of this. Look at some of the marketing projects that you're back burnering now. I think now, you know, is a good time to give that some thought too.
Wow, it's really good. I mean, I think we could do a whole session on that, Amy, in itself, what you just talked about the first way. But you're right. A little bit of empathy now is really important, I think, in your marketing message. And you know, we have to give it to our professionals on the marketing side who really, frankly, this was not their fault either. They had to change their whole strategy, cancel all of their conferences, right? Strategy about how to do things. Right about, you know, the other part of the question, which was, are you doing too much marketing? And yeah, there's a fine balance there. And Amy brought up some great points about what you're doing in your marketing and in your ability that you're really kind of changing the way that you're doing your business today. Because too much marketing is a bad thing. I mean, coming from this side of it, you know, sharing on social was just more of like a thing, a checked to box. So our marketing people kind of did after they did their main message, that main message is. And if it was going to a conference or presenting something at a webinar or something like that, then those are really great things. But there is a way that you can really blend out your clients that don't want to hear from you if too much marketing. It's overdone, and simple is best. Follow Amy's guides a little bit on sharing some more empathy and maybe having some right things. And I think the other thing is that now that we've done this for a couple of weeks, we've been doing this for 30 days now, 40 days probably, depending where you're located around the country. But the fact of the matter is that now, like Amy said, it's time to be thinking about what will be happening next and how to propel your marketing coming through the end of this as we come out of this. So all great things to think about. So thanks for those tips, Amy.
Well, those are really some great and great actionable tips from both of you. And just so you know, I still see a lot of people signing up or attending this webinar. We are recording this, so it's going to be available for all of you later as well. Next question for you, Linda and Dustin. What type of communication messages work best, and what are the best ways to get that message out?
Well, I think Amy and Joe both touched on a number of points, and I'd like to reinforce those. We're in what I think of as the first phase, and an analogy is what's happening on the question of when do you reopen the economy? And a lot of people are talking about that as something that's phased. It's like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. We're somewhere in the middle to end of phase 1. And I think the first phase is really one of a shared responsibility in staying visible between marketing and business development. And initially, to Amy's point about communicating with empathy, some of the best early messages come directly to clients from the people that they have the most relationship with, which would be the business development people. There's also corporate marketing type messages, and as Amy mentioned, those are very important on the business continuity issues, reassuring clients that you're continuing to operate functionally, that remote workforce is secure, their data is secure, their processes are secure in whatever they're doing with you. As you move out of that phase, then to Joe's point, you have to be thinking about how do I want to show up in terms of being a trusted or valued resource? And everybody's scrambling. All of our inboxes are full with webinar invitations. There's a lot of competition for that visibility. And you don't want to come across as a me too redundant type of resource. So you really need to step back and say, how will you differentiate yourself in terms of being seen at this time? What do you really have to share that is a different message or a different resource? Business problems aren't going away. Yes, this is a huge pandemic and it's raised all kinds of different issues, but there are still substantive business problems that have to be dealt with. So as you begin to think about what do you have to offer, how can you reach out to your association contacts, to your business partners, maybe it's law firms, maybe it's other people, and talk about joint webinars, offer to help put together a webinar and think through topics where you can participate with other colleagues outside of your own firm. You don't have to do your own webinars, and there are challenges to that. So maybe it's a shared resource. And I think, Dustin, you may have a perspective in terms of how all of us could work more with our association contacts to help both parties stay visible during this time.
Absolutely. It's, you're absolutely right, Melinda. And this is a great opportunity for a win-win for both industry vendors and for associations. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I mean, associations are, hungry for content right now, hungry for opportunities to stay relevant in front of their audiences as well, speaking personally here. So absolutely, this is a great time to reach out to your associations that you belong to and touch base with them and see how you can get involved there. I'll also, I think I want to reinforce what has been said so far about tone. I think that you can't reinforce that enough right now. And not only the empathetic tone, but also remembering who your audience is, and I think almost more importantly, who your audience's audience is. I think for most folks on the call, if you're a vendor in the industry or a service provider, you think more of it in a B2C, or a B2B paradigm. But remember that those businesses, those lenders that you're reaching out to for business opportunities, their end is the consumer end. And so, they are certainly going to be held responsible. We're in an age where the smallest infraction can be magnified on social media. So definitely keep in mind that even when you're just communicating between between companies, that can be, that will eventually, if it's not done in the right tone, there's a good chance that it winds up in the public, and at that point you've got problems. You have different problems at that point, and then you're going to call Amy for help. So I'd also say that having gone through, for those who've gone through the financial crisis in 07, 08, I think there's some lessons that we can learn from that. And if you didn't go through that, now is a good time to find someone who did and ask them, how they got through it and what they learned from that. Because certainly issues of tone and being sympathetic to not only what companies are going through, but what consumers are going through and how that affects those companies. I know particularly in the foreclosure crisis after the economic collapse in 07, 08, there was major consternation and major mistakes made within the industry about how to present ourselves to the public. So this is a good opportunity to learn from those mistakes, to be empathetic, as said here, and make sure you keep an eye on that tone. The other thing I'll mention when it comes to your message is remember that, and I kind of touched on this, but remember that everything you say, unless you are speaking with deep throat in the parking garage, everything you say electronically is may as well, you have to assume that it's going to get out there. You have to assume that everything you say is going to be seen and heard by everybody, and it's going to be seen and heard forever. There is very little, unless you've got carrier pigeons going back and forth, there's very little information out there that is not accessible in some way or another to the public at some point. So just keep that in mind when you're making, that was one of the things that in the financial crisis in 07, 08, there was a lot of back and forth over email and on social media that was just the wrong tone and really ended up getting magnified and hurting the companies involved. The other thing I'll mention is when it comes to social media as a way to get your message out, the landscape in social media is changing right now, right under our foot, as the crisis is unfolding and things are changing. So, I mean, a good example is Facebook. at the end of last year, at the end of 2019, Facebook was actually seeing declines in active users. Now, suddenly they've seen a huge bump in active users worldwide. And, but you have to think about that and say, well, do I want to just jump in on Facebook and put my message out there? Maybe not. Maybe you got to look at why is there an increase in active users on Facebook? Is it because people are interested in looking for business opportunities on Facebook? Or more likely, are folks looking to get their news on social media? That, again, and that's a generational thing as well. People are getting their news now on social media almost as much, it seems like, as through broadcast media and other avenues. So keep an eye on social media and those platforms and what's changing and why they're changing, and whether or not there's an opportunity there, or whether or not you need to sort of shift gears on where you're putting your efforts and your resources. And then the final thing I'll say on this is I think this is a good time to tap into those existing clients that you have and use them as resources, as brand ambassadors, as champions of your company to get your message out there. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. You've already got companies that love what you do and think you do a great job. And this is a time to reach out to them and say, hey, let's work together. This is, again, a win-win opportunity for us. And instead of just getting a quote from them and slapping it on your website, where who knows who, if anyone will ever read that, be creative. Come up with a 2-minute Q&A video, almost like a micro webinar or a micro podcast, and use that as a sort of a way to keep yourself visible in front of your audience that's different, that takes advantage of the fact that more people are watching video than ever before. So a couple of tips there. I'll toss it back to you, John.
Wow, I love that. Good tips. Thanks for that, Dustin. Okay, next question for Amy and Joe. What public relations strategies can you use to reflect positively on your own brand at this time?
Well, I mean, public relations is really all about maintaining that favorable public image for a company. So the first thing that comes to mind is media relations, especially with the industry. That now's the time to be a strong resource to the editors at the publications, to write articles or be interviewed. Focus on building your relationships with them and sending them a list of things that you're able to talk with them about, specifically how, the CARES Act is impacting them and their businesses. I think a lot of people, want to know more about that. I also think, Linda talked a little bit about the webinars, and I think, people can really maintain their positive image and thought leadership position through sharing wisdom and their expertise through those webinars, and also through associations. I know all the major associations have canceled their on-site conferences, but there's going to be some virtual ones, and Dustin and Linda are going to talk about that a little bit later. But I do think it's important to mention that when you're considering your PR strategy. When it comes to PR on any new products and services and doing press releases or anything like that, I only think companies should be doing those if their product or service is helping someone right now. Otherwise, I think it's smart to delay the launch of a product right now. But the benefit of that is that gives people more time, if you are going to delay it, to properly develop a strategy to make sure that you have solid messaging on it when it is ready to really be rolled out. I think, within the next few months, few weeks here, things are going to keep rapidly changing, and people are going to want more information and different products as we continue to move into this new normal. And then another thing that I think companies really should be looking at from a PR strategy is community and what they can do to help. What makes sense for a company to be aligned with from a charity standpoint. I think it's so awesome to see all of these companies that have really stepped up and have donated and helped out during this pandemic. I think there's plenty of overlap between doing good and looking good. So, we encourage that. And then in community engagement too on social. I think, it's a great opportunity from a PR standpoint to use social media to develop an active community with your customers and others on LinkedIn. I mean, Joe, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the same thing. Those great. Geez, you're awesome, Amy. You got some really great points. Yeah, I would say on the public relations side, for sure, delay that release of something that you're going to be releasing that's going to be out, that's going to revolutionize the lending experience, right? I mean, everything is revolutionizing something nowadays. First of all, think of something else besides revolutionize. But yeah, today is a time to be really focusing on your own community and who you're helping out locally, and things that you've done as an organization to give you that really good PR bump. It's not about promoting your products right now. It's not about touting, the positive benefits of the attributes of your product, right? It's how are you as your organization, how are you in particular as a leader or thought leader, if that's how you want to approach this, are helping out in your own community and changing things. Those are the stories that really get read today. Those are the stories that I think about later on when I may want to interact with you, because I feel from your story that you told me about how your company's helping out, that aligns with my vision of how to help people out. In today's environment, why would you not do that? You've been given a gift, you better use it. If your company is caring, and I know a lot of us are in the California Association, the way that we have this whole thing set up, there's so many great people. All the events that we do, that we put on, somebody's always doing a donation and everything else. That's time to really showcase that. Showcase about you and your company and how you're giving back, how you're helping out, how you're making meals, how your families maybe even making meals for people in the health community too as well. So so those are the type of stories I think be very good and very positive, just to top on what Amy had said. So
very good points. Question for both of you I have over here. Is it possible that you're releasing a product that just happens to be timely, though? Would it make sense to promote and launch that type of a product, like an appraisal software type of a product?
Oh yeah, like I like today, that's what I do. I have these like no-touch COVID appraisal type things, and we did that. We thought that was appropriate. We went out and developed a special web page saying, hey, listen, we understand that your pipeline may be locked up because you can't get the appraiser in to do the inspection. There's these new type of products that can help out. So we definitely did that. We thought that was appropriate. I don't know, Amy, what did you think about something like that? I mean, like what I did, was that appropriate?
Absolutely. I really definitely that's appropriate. If it ties in and it's helping someone right now and it's relevant right now, then you should absolutely launch it. I think right now it's all about being relevant and that it aligns with.
It's not like we just perfectly had that ready to go or anything else. We already knew that was available. We just kind of said, oh, well, this is another use case for this particular, inspection product. Basically, it was the consumer doing their own inspection, right? And doing their own interior photos and everything else, and it's geofence on the property. So that was logical. That made a lot of good, positive sense to do that, and that gave us the opportunity to do that marketing. We were thoughtful about it, though. We said that this was because of the pandemic, that we think that this is relevant. We did state our case first, and I thought that was important to do that, because we're not just trying to, hey, we're trying to win the lotto here on a huge contagion that we just had. That's not what we were trying to do. That would be bad PR, right, Amy?
I think we can all agree on that one.
Here, while you're down, let me kick you one more time.
So, Joe and Linda, business developers want to stay on the radar, and this kind of ties in a little bit to the last question, right? Because business developers want to stay on the radar of their clients and prospects and want help marketing, especially because they're not able to go to conferences and meetings or have client meetings face to face. So what is smart business development during this time and what is not? And as a little bit of a follow-up to that, how should marketing be working with business development to support these efforts?
Want me to go first, Linda?
Sure, that'd be great.
So yeah, I think as a business development guy, I think I don't, that's what I basically do. I call on enterprise clients today, and I'm really focused in on that. I'm not a big cold calling type guy or anything else. Usually there's relationships that I know, and that's kind of how I kind of try to open up the angle. But definitely to stay on my clients' radars and my prospects' radars, what I'm really trying to do is really leveraging marketing to open up those needs that they may have. But at this time, I'm not really, doing aggressive marketing for that. I'm really, laying off on that piece of it, really preparing for the time that we open up again. I think some of the biggest things that I've done, though, when I've been talking to people is I've been using my own empathy up front. And the first things that I'm asking them is, how are you and your family coping? What are you doing? How's it going there? Is everybody in your family healthy? And usually that gives my prospects or my clients an opportunity to talk about what's happening and where they're located. And we're all working from home. So that's usually kind of a segue into the conversation, right? And I'm definitely not pounding. I'm definitely not, really coming with a very solid message like, this is my message of the day, I'm going to get it out, right? That's not what I'm doing at all. So I've really kind of changed my whole strategy myself. I've been more of one to just make relationships and try to gain commonality about this situation that we're all going through. I'm being very positive because I've been through the last financial crisis. I've been through 3 of them now, I guess, because I'm kind of old. Wow, I guess I am old. But I think coming out of this last one that we had in 2007 and 2008, and I really say 2007 because that's when it started. Everybody says 2008, but it was early 2007 when the first inklings of this thing were happening. And I think that, all the experience that we've had and everything else and the measures that we've taken so far, I think we're going to come through this just fine. So I'm keeping it very positive and really not selling, just not selling. I mean, I'm really just on the relationship style level right now at this point. And so that's where I've been focusing, and not having these face-to-face meetings and everything else. I'm really trying to provide a lot of value when we get into topics. And I come to the meeting prepared to talk about those topics if they want to talk about them. Like I'm having a big meeting tomorrow morning, early my time, and the conversation's about, really a strategy conversation. And I basically broke out the whiteboard to try to get them to interact with me because I know the message I really want to say, but at the same time, I'm really bringing them along with me. Because if I start dumping and product feature dumping, it's never going to work, right? So I have to take a different tack during this time.
Joe, do you think that this is going to change the way business developers develop business in the long term?
I think so. I think we better be ready prepared for.
I agree with you.
Yeah. I mean, in my type of level, when calling enterprise clients, it's really, you got to get face to face, right? And that may not happen again for a while. So yeah, I have to change my strategy.
Yeah, I have a feeling that this is going to be a very long-term thing in terms of how we now develop relationships as business developers. And I think that there is going to be less air travel as a result of this because people are going to find that they're perfectly able to have video conferences like this and accomplish quite a bit. But anyway, that's Linda, what are your thoughts?
I definitely concur with comments that Joe made and John, that you made as well. I think it is fundamentally changing the way that business developers think about approaching clients, and the empathy part and the sensitivity to not being seen as overly aggressive or selling, and yet still being visible and still being connected is vitally important. You had asked how marketing can help business development. I think we can all step back as marketing people, one, be talking with business development about what are they hearing from clients as to these business problems and needs, and really being able to put information, ideas in the hands of the business developers that they can use, whether it's relevant posting on social media, whether it's being prepared to have deeper discussions with clients on different topics. I think we can do a good job on helping craft some of those messages and remind everyone about what we do have available as individual companies that they can make available when appropriate to specific clients. I think the other message is that not all visibility it's not synonymous. Visibility is not synonymous with good branding. And you can over communicate or over market in this time. So I think you have to be asking yourself, to Amy's point, twice a week, whatever is the right frequency of communication. I think begin with the end in mind. How do you want to, I don't mean that in a demise kind of way.
Sure.
When this is over, will your clients consider you in retrospect as a really trusted resource, or will you come off as somebody that was too much in their face? You want to be positioning yourself as the one that they're going to go to, not only now, but in the future.
Yeah.
Those are really good points. Linda, I think you were mentioning the other day that you might have some examples of people who are doing things that were a bit inappropriate, and I was wondering if there's anything that you would be able to.
Yes, I mean, I think we'll get into talking a little bit more, and Dustin touched upon this in social media, but you really want to be thoughtful, particularly if you are posting. Is it something that you're sharing that is going to be seen as, hey, this is helping me solve a business problem? There's a difference between that and just wanting to be seen. So I think you always have to be asking yourself, am I overusing or overcommitting to trying to stay visible? And that's a delicate balance. It's a balance for a company, and it's a balance for each individual person, because this isn't about just building the company's brand and the company's visibility. This is about everyone's individual personal brand. I think we can't lose sight of that as well. And that's, you don't want to just have rules and restrictions. Some companies do, certainly those that have are publicly traded or have media relation departments. But absent that, I think everyone has to be thoughtful about how each individual personal brand builds up into the overall corporate brand.
Wow, that's very good insight. And I think it makes a lot of sense to think about what is the communication you're putting out there, and are you just putting the communication out there because it's a piece of communication and you're exposing yourself again, or is it genuinely communication that's going to be helpful? So put yourself in the shoes of the recipient of the message.
Yes, very much so.
Business developers who shied away from social media in the past, and I've met some of them at conferences and everywhere, right? There's some business developers that just don't really like social media, or they aren't very good at it. I think that as a result of this whole crisis, they're going to suddenly become very good at it, and that's actually that's a positive thing.
It is. It's a good development, and we'll all need to work together on this with both sides, both marketing and business development, to make sure there's a coordinated, cohesive messaging that's coming through across both spectrums.
Right, and that's a very good point that you just raised, is the collaboration between sales and marketing.
Yes.
Yeah, don't be, as the business development guy out there, doing counteractive of really what your marketing department's trying to do, right? And don't just do it for visibility's sake. Give value, share your empathy, right, of the current situation that you're in, but make sure you're aligning yourself with your organization, because it really looks bad when you don't.
Right.
Is this the time we pull up that really embarrassing picture we saw on LinkedIn? Or we're not going to do that? We scratch that from the whole meeting?
I know that both Amy and I find that with a lot of companies that we go out and visit with, that that lack of collaboration between sales and marketing does cost, because then you don't realize the content gaps if you don't have that collaboration in place. But you know what? Let me move on to the next question over here. For you, Linda and Dustin, how do you continue your content marketing and increase your thought leadership by working with associations and with partners, doing webinars, podcasts, virtual conferences, and contributing content to industry publications?
Well, we started talking about it, but I'd like to take that a bit further. In the beginning, I talked about how this is a phased approach. And so we're in this middle to late phase of stage one, and certainly thinking about how we can participate in webinars and reach out to media people and to publications. And the current version then is mostly what people want is information related to the current crisis, to the pandemic. You're starting to see right now a little bit more emerging as other business topics. But this is a really good time to be thinking in terms of your longer term editorial or media strategy and media calendar. Most publications, a lot of conference planners they're looking out now several months into the future. They don't necessarily, in the case of an association, know if they're going to have their conference, if it's going to be virtual, if it's going to actually happen, if it's going to be canceled completely. But a lot of people are very optimistic that there will be maybe even summer conferences or certainly fall conferences. So you need to be stepping back now and thinking about the topics that you're going to want to be proposing for articles, for webinars, for speaking proposals, and be reaching out to people, first and foremost, associations and others that already know you. I think, it's not as much a situation where new associations or new publications are going to take a risk on working with you. Same way new clients may not be willing, in some cases, to talk with you as much as current clients. So leverage those relationships that you have, and I think approach it as a partnership. As Dustin mentioned, associations are looking for content. They're trusting that their members and business partners will be able to help them through this. And the same is true for many of the publications. There was a while back where getting people to accept content was more challenging. Now there's so much demand for content and relevant content that it's an opportunity to really be thoughtful about your overall strategy. The big question is the crystal ball. None of us have that crystal ball. What topics are going to be really relevant? If you're writing an article today, it might not be published for 2 or 3 months. How do you do that? What is it that you're going to say? It's one thing to do a webinar today on the most recent guidance that came out, a regulatory guidance or something like that. It's much harder to be thinking ahead into the future. But I wanted to at least pose a few thoughts that I've had about what some of those topics might be. Certainly, people are going to be coming out of this. Companies are going to be coming out of it saying, we want to grow our business again. We want to be able to increase our market share. And so to the extent that you can be a trusted resource and help them with some of those growth strategies, those could be good future topics. And again, not pushing products or services, but really how some of the things that you have to offer could help them do that. I think another topic is going to be this digital transformation and the expansion of what we've already seen as the first wave of this. Companies have been now working remotely. Their workforce is getting more comfortable with that idea. Some will continue that business model. Certainly the consumer business model is dramatically changing. People by force are having to do more and more of their transactions online. So that's going to really accelerate the shift in the digital transformation. So if your clients are not doing that, and I know that California MBA and this committee's been really strong on trying to make those resources visible and available. And Dustin may talk about the Innovators Conference and some of the things that we've done in the past. But I think those type of topics will be relevant. And then the third thing I would say is that exams, regulatory exams, are not going to stop. Despite maybe some temporarily changes in guidance or things like that, you still need to be prepared. There's still going to be questions asked, and you're still going to have other issues that you're dealing with. Things are changing rapidly in the servicing world. There's going to be a lot of pent-up demand for information about how to handle and what are the best practices that people are using to manage things like loss mitigation, forbearance, complaints, all those different kinds of things that we're just beginning to see the tip of the iceberg on. And then the last thing I would add before turning it over to Dustin is we don't know how this whole virtual conference strategy is going to work. And I think we'll all be learning as we go. Webinars are one thing, but to what extent will people be willing to spend 2 days sitting in front of a computer instead of networking and going to sessions? I think that's really an unknown question that we'll all be grappling with. And so how much do you want to commit resources to participating in some of these things early on? So Dustin, I don't know what your thoughts are. You've obviously had to grapple with this question as an association.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a little disappointed, Linda. I really thought you were going to have the answer for what's going to happen. Virtual conference. I'm ready to take some notes here. Yeah, I mean, I don't have this in my notes, but I mean, I'll just some inside baseball on what's going on here, at least with the California NBA, and I'm sure this is happening with every other, any trade association, any group that's putting on conferences. And yeah, we are all right now trying to figure out the virtual conference thing. And to your point, Linda, I mean, the big question is, and if you've been in a virtual conference before, it's really tough from my point of view at this point to try to find the line where it goes from being a glorified webinar to an actual digital experience. And I think, making that leap is going to be what, trade associations, us included, are, trying to figure out right now. I mean, because you're one of just, again, some inside baseball, we can't, we can't honestly monetize a glorified webinar and call it a conference and ask companies to sponsor it or pay money to sit there in front of their computer and just watch a webinar, something they, information they could probably get for free or whatever. So we're working through those problems right now as far as, what we're going to do with our conferences. We are, again, like you said, Linda, we're still hopeful that we can do some in-person events this year, but we're absolutely making plans right now for if that's not going to be possible, then what's our next step? And just personally, we are going to do our best to not do a glorified webinar and call it a conference. We're going to do our best to make it an actual experience, because otherwise, in my view, you may as well punt in the next year if you can't do anything better than a webinar.
You know what, I feel like this is also going to drive people to make better use of the conference apps that they download, like from you guys and the NBA and other conferences, because historically usage hasn't been all that great from what I've seen.
Yeah.
No, and it depends on the conference that and the demographic, especially in our industry. You're right. I mean, we've tinkered with different apps. I've talked to different other industry groups and said, hey, what are we doing something wrong? Because our usage will sometimes tap out at 50%, maybe a little higher. But so many, and you guys have touched on this, so many business developers in the industry are, they're not going to, get on their app and click, I want to have a meeting with John Seroka, so I'm going to push this button and wait for him to email me back. I mean, they're just going to find you in the hall and say, hey, let's, grab 5 minutes and grab a couple of chairs here and let's talk, or meet me in my booth or something like that, or let's have lunch together. So it's a lot of just the tried and true method at this point. So you're right, John. I think that the app developers themselves, we've been in contact with a couple of them, and they are absolutely working on sort of transitioning themselves to providing more than just that, the app that goes along with the in-person event. They're trying to figure out how they can provide that truly digital or virtual conference experience that goes beyond just a webinar. So I'll just, getting back to my notes here before we run out of time. I mean, again, this is a time when associations are, very, 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 very interested in staying in front of their members and showing value right now. When the market's great, when times are great, it's easy for members of trade associations to kind of forget that they belong to this trade association. They'll write the membership check and cheer and kind of go about their business, and and that's just sort of how that works. When times are bad, that's when the trade association has to prove their worth through advocacy efforts and through continuing to provide content. We can't, at the California NBA, and this goes for every other trade association, this is not the time when you can stick your head in the sand or hunker down and ride out the storm. Your members are going to ride out the storm and hunker down if they need to, but you don't have that luxury. You have to, earn those membership dollars. And so we're absolutely hungry for relevant content. So if you're a member of a trade association, think about it this way: you've already paid in. Most of the benefits that you get, there's no additional cost. I get, just an example here. I get calls every once in a while from members saying, I'd like to submit an article for the magazine. I'd like to, speak on a webinar or at a conference. What's the additional cost for that? And I'll say, are you kidding me? You've already joined. You're a member. That's it. That's the point of membership, is those benefits. So if you've paid into membership, either with the California NBA or elsewhere, take advantage of that membership. Call up the staff at that association, get in touch with them and say, hey, I've paid my membership dues. I want to get some value out of it now. I want to be able, I've got a great topic on a webinar for a webinar. I've got a great topic for an article for your magazine or newsletter. And Linda, you're right. I mean, they plan those things out months in advance. So you need to be having those conversations right now if you want to get something in, for a summer conference or even for a fall conference. We have fall conferences and we're starting to work the details out right now and starting to talk to sponsors and speakers. So the sooner you can do that, the better. Oh, good.
Oh, so go ahead. I didn't want to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm a freight train, so you just got to stop me if if I'm starting to derail or you need to stop me. Just throw up your hands, John.
Oh, you know what? This is great. We're getting a couple of questions in over here, so I want to make sure that they get a hand before we run out of time.
Yeah, jump in.
I'll just throw this out to any one of you that wants to answer this. But do you have any ideas on how to engage participants during a webinar?
So I'll take that, since we've been talking about that literally this week at a staff level here, trying to figure out again how to take it beyond just a webinar experience. And some of the ideas we've talked about. I mean, it's do we send physical things in advance and come up with one of those things where it's when you're on the webinar, we say, hey, go to your resource box that we sent you and pull out your thing of sanitizer, and whoever's got this number on there, you win a prize. And it's also stuff like where we've thought about, if you're going to have a webinar like this, are you going to tape it and then play it live? And then when you play it live, because the webinar will essentially be, or the session will essentially be available in a tape to record format, tape to live format throughout that conference period. But we've talked about, what if we had at a specific time, instead of making you sit at a computer for 8 hours straight, because no one's going to do that, we say at this specific time, how to stay visible during a crisis session, all the speakers will be in there for a live chat. And that provides a little more incentive to be there at that specific time and engage with the audience. But I mean, that is certainly something that's up for debate, about how to keep people engaged throughout that event. And there's talks about gamification and building points throughout the conference. I'm not a big believer in that, honestly. Just with our audience, I don't think I don't think our audience is all about collecting coins to or tokens or something. So we've got to do something a little bit more, shall I say, adult than that. And so we're working on those ideas right now.
Great. Anybody else have any thoughts on that? Amy, Linda, Joe?
I just think one of the biggest things you can do is there's some pretty easy software that you can have where you can do the online live voting for the questions that you ask, right? So people can participate in the questions. So I think that's really easy, and it's cheap, and usually it's free. So you could do that, and then everybody could just text message in their answers, right? There's little technology that does that. That usually works pretty good because you can see what the audience is thinking right away. And that usually will stimulate more questions to get more people involved.
All right, now this is a very important question, everybody, that came up. So I really want to make sure that this gets handled. The person here said, great webinar, super useful info. Random, unrelated question, but can you ask Amy what her paint color is in her background?
I admit I do not know the exact paint color, but I can definitely get that.
Okay, well, I've got the email here for this person, so I'll make sure you get it, Amy.
Good job of engaging the audience, though, John.
Yeah, so that's definitely Suave. It's Suave number 42 over there at Home Depot.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, I have another question over here. Have you considered using Brella or other conference apps that allow connections between vendors and buyers? Value add beyond a glorified webinar is meaningful relationships and connections between conference goers is a huge benefit in the in-person conference.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think that was totally grammatically correct. Maybe I skipped a word or two over there.
Yeah,
I've used Brella. I think Brella is a good one. I think Brella is pretty good. There's been a couple other ones. Royal Media has one that's not so bad. That's the people from Bank Innovation that I went to. But Brella is not bad, only because it is a great way to do that. There was another app that I saw that was really interesting, and I don't know which one it is, but it seems to be branded. You got to download the app and then you find your conference. and you download the conference piece, those seem to be very, very robust in all the services they offer as far as app things are concerned.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you attended a California MBA event last year or the year before, you know, we use the Brella app. So we're actually in conversations right now with them. I didn't mention them earlier, but they are one of the app developers that are working on building out that virtual conference experience. And I mean,
Good.
I've been impressed so far with the demos I've seen, and we're certainly considering that in case we have to go to a virtual event this year.
Okay. Amy and Joe, how does this crisis affect your company's social media policy? And what are the best practices during this time for the use of social media like LinkedIn?
Well, you know, hopefully you have a social media policy in place and a crisis. You know, that's kind of like the first thing, right? So I think everyone needs to understand what they're responsible for on the marketing team, you know, in your company. Who is posting the updates? Who is handling and answering questions and handling customer support? Who's monitoring the wider conversation? And then fact checking and correcting any rumors. You know, you want to make sure you're posting frequently and communicating often while things are happening and being transparent. But I also think your policy, you need to make sure you're really listening on social, especially now, because this is an opportunity where you're going to hear things going on and what your audience and your customers need. You know, they're going to be talking to you online, and you want to make sure you understand that. It also could be kind of a tense situation for some companies. You know, there could be layoffs and backlash, and you could have some disgruntled people on social media. So you need to be prepared for that and make sure that your employees are prepared for that to know how you should handle it. So you should make sure your guidelines incorporate all of this stuff into it. You know, crisis communications is communication plans. A lot of companies have them with their companies. Since there is such liquidity issues right now for a lot of companies, I do want to mention that it might be worth checking out if companies' D&O policies include crisis communications. I think a lot of them do.
Great suggestion. Great suggestion.
And, you know, that's really essentially free money for them to help navigate through it, to help you update, you know, some of those social policies, media policies as well.
I would have to say on that point, to Amy's point, reputational management is really important, right? That's important to the organization just in general. I think everybody's reputation, if you had somebody take, you know, a photo and share it that wasn't, you know, a positive photo of you or something, and trying to ask them to take it down, that's a tough thing to do. So reputational management is really important. Amy also said it too as well, social listening. I can't tell you that how important that is. Your marketing team really needs to have the technology and the software to listen about what's happening out there, because if you're not listening, you're going to get mowed over. You'll find a disgruntled employee or whatever the case may be, or a bad relationship that you had, they're just trashing you online. If you're not listening, you're going to move, right? And you need to know how to respond to that. So that, you know, Amy's points are spot on.
Got another question here. How do you know when you need to punt on a convention based on members and sponsors or speakers not wanting to travel? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Before the guarantee runs out, so you get your money back.
Yeah, to say the least, it's several factors go into that. I mean, it's a matter of, at this point, will the state even allow you to hold an event? And, if the state says no, are they saying that with legal force that allows you to, break a contract with a hotel? Or, I mean, those are major dollars at stake there. And that definitely goes into whether or not you can hold an event or not. And then you've got to talk to your big sponsors, your, sort of your VIPs and the companies and individuals that have been going to the events for years, and your solid base of conference attendees. Find out what's going on with them. I mean, it really is a matter of just putting the phone to your ear and calling a lot of these companies and saying, what is going on at your company? Are they allowing travel at all, or are they allowing it and not reimbursing you? I mean, or are they just locking you guys down? Are they telling you for how long? Then it's a matter of, do you can you move the convention outside the state to another state? I mean, we've even discussed that internally, if that's even an option. So there are a million options. But speaking personally at the California MBA, the very, very, very last thing we want to do is cancel an event. I mean, particularly with events like our Mortgage Innovators Conference, where we've got, it's a newer event. It was brand new last year, and we had a great turnout and a great conference, and we really don't want to lose that momentum. We're going to do everything we can to make sure
Right.
that conference happens this year. So, I mean, I can't speak for every association, but the idea of punting, makes me want to throw up. And I want to, basically, if you're using the football analogy, if it's 4th down, we're going for it. We're not going to punt.
Good. Good. I think also the act of God, if you have a contract that you're trying to get out of as well, there's the act of God clause, right? I'm sure this would probably heavily qualify as an act of God type thing. So
Yep.
if you have to break a contract, I think there's an easy way of doing that.
So we have several more questions over here that are coming in, and let's see if we can get through them in the next few minutes. What type of content would you suggest on posting via social media to engage audiences throughout the pandemic? Anybody have any?
I can try to take that. I think the first thing I'd like to react to, following on some of the social media policy questions, is be careful very much about likes, and make sure that if you're liking something, that you're really reading through what the person that sent it to you or did the original post actually said. There's certain things out there that are taking opinions, for example, on how well the PPP program was rolled out or anything like that. So you want to be really careful not to be controversial and start to engage on that kind of thing. There should probably be a company policy around the kinds of comments for people to be making back to other people's posts. That's the first thing that I would say. Secondly, I would say if you have content that you think actually solves a real business problem, again, not everything, although it seems that way, not everything is COVID-19. There's still real work being done in companies, and they still need solutions, and they still need things. So be stepping back and thinking about what other kinds of things are highly relevant right now, or will start to emerge as really relevant, and maybe be ahead of the curve on that. As I mentioned, maybe some of the servicing topics, a lot of, if you have things around best practices in handling certain types of operations, that would be really, I think, viewed positively. It may not be read right away, but I think it shows that you are really thinking about your client and the kinds of things that they're grappling with. We posted something, for example, on change management. It happened to be something we wrote a little while ago, but it addressed compliance officers and how they handle strategic change, planned change, and unexpected change. And we thought that that might be a resource for people to think about, again, how can they manage change. It wasn't, product promotion, a service promotion. It was just a resource type of piece.
Good.
You know what? I want to reinforce what you said, Linda. I thought that was a really good point. Looking at it from the standpoint of first engaging other people and engaging with their posts and commenting on their posts, and like you said, reading what they're saying and not just liking it, but going beyond the like and actually making a comment makes a big difference. Because then the more you do that, doesn't take that long either. The more you start paying really start paying attention to other people and what they're saying and sharing things and actually commenting on them, then you're going to see that it comes back to you. People will engage you as well. So good points. All right. I do not see that we have any other questions over here at this point. So with that, I think that this concludes our webinar. So everybody who attended, everybody who's still here, do me a really big favor. You're going to be receiving a survey within about, an hour or so, Dustin?
Yeah.
Okay. please do us a favor, fill out that survey. Let us know what you thought of this content today. We hope you really liked it. We hope it was useful for you. And also, let us know about anything that you'd like to see covered in a future webinar. We'd love to know that as well. And with that, everybody have a great day. Keep safe out there and stay healthy above all.
All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you.